co-hosts, Kurt Hess and Kyle Searle, and we have a very special guest with us tonight, YSU legend and athletic director Ron Strollo. Couple things we definitely want to get through and talk about is that everyone is talking about the house settlement, the house settlement, the house settlement. We're definitely going to get with Ron Strollo on what the house settlement is, both at a 10,000 square view of what it is at large. And then we're going to try to home in on our conferences, both Missouri Valley and Horizon League, to see what this means to Youngstown State. But before we dive into that, as always, we are on YouTube Live. If you have any questions for Ron Strollo, please send them in. We are in the live chat now. Go ahead and follow us on Instagram, Whitetown Penguin Podcast. So really, Ron, I guess not confuse our guys, our listeners, as Searle kind of mentioned and Kurt mentioned a little bit. I think a lot of our listeners have heard about the house settlement, but they don't know anything about it, haven't read articles, and it is really going to change college athletics. At least it's starting to. Just, I guess, at the start, can you explain from just A to Z in a very broad, general sense, what is the house settlement, how it came about?
Yeah, it's a class action lawsuit, and really the best way to think about it is, NIL became legal, and it became legal, but in a way that universities weren't allowed to pay players yet, but these collectives were, and outside companies were, and so the house settlement is just a group of student athletes, a class of student athletes that came before NIL, became legal, sued for, I guess, back pay or pay they didn't get. And then what happened essentially is, I think the NCAA obviously, felt like they were going to lose that lawsuit. So really the past year or so, or really almost 2 years, we've been trying to deal with this settlement. So it never went to court. It was a settlement between the class action lawsuit, which was House, and the NCAA. The interesting part is House was a men's swimming student athlete, and it's interesting because sometimes those are the student athletes that are getting most affected, in the negative way. But that settlement, as it entered the court systems, and the judge kind of reviewed it and started listening to both sides. It just got settled and just got approved by the judge here recently. That's why you're hearing a lot about it. We really knew about this settlement probably last year. Well, not probably last fall is when we started having conversations with our coaches about what that house settlement really was going to mean to Youngstown State. One major piece to it was the roster limitations. I don't know if you guys, so before we would have, 63 scholarships that we could divide up over 85 kids, but we could have as many kids on our team as we wanted. If we wanted 200 kids on our team, we could have 200 kids, but we could only give 63 scholarships to 85 kids. Ohio State was able to give 85 scholarships to 85 kids. What this changed was now every sport has a roster limitation. So we were always around 125, 130 football players. But now that limit for Division I, whether it's Youngstown State or Ohio State, is 105. So that meant, a lot of anxiety and stress for our coaches and our student athletes, as they tried to figure out where they fell. And, so you might have had a kid who was a walk-on that was doing everything you asked them to do, but you were going to have that hard conversation with them that they might have to go spend their senior year somewhere else. So really, all those conversations were happening throughout, the winter and things like that, and it was really difficult. And but as those stories got back to the judge didn't like that very much. And now they came up with this designated student athletes. They didn't want the current student athletes to be negatively affected. So if a kid got cut per se, because of this new roster limit. And they were already on the team or being recruited. Now they've got this designation. So now it's more of a phase-in of the roster limitations. But, back to those roster limitations, and again, there's a lot here, so I apologize if it feels like I'm rambling, but now you're allowed, including us, now you're allowed to give 105 full scholarships. And so we went from being allowed to give 63. Now we're allowed to give all those 105 a full scholarship. And the same thing at Ohio State. They can go from 85 to 105. Now the reality
does that mean the walk-on life is being phased out permanently?
Well, in some sense, but I guess, we talked a little bit about this, off air. What's still probably going to happen is Youngstown State and North Dakota State, they're still going to give probably around 63 scholarships. And the reality is Ohio State and Alabama, they're probably still going to give 85 scholarships. So you're still going to have some walk-ons. I think the other thing that really changed in this House settlement, now that we've got through the roster discussion, is now, before the House settlement, it was universities weren't allowed to sign NIL contracts with student athletes. It had to go through a collective or a third party, and our coaches technically weren't allowed to be involved in any of those conversations. So it became a wild, wild west where, certain donors were doing recruiting for the coaches and trying to basically hire players. It kind of got out of control. And this House settlement, I think, is one of the things the NCAA got out of this, was to allow institutions to start signing NIL contracts with the student athletes. And I think that's a very positive thing. And we immediately, wanted to bring those payments internal. You can still do external payments, but those external payments are subject to a third party. It's actually Deloitte and Touche looks at the contract just to see if these kids are getting market value. Are they getting $1 million for one autograph session? And now there's a third party that looks at that. But if you do the contract through the university, that third party doesn't look at the contract. So we can sign them for whatever dollar amount we want, except you're limited to, there's a cap. And I think right now the cap's like $22 million. We don't plan on hitting the cap. So, but schools like Ohio State and stuff, they're going to worry. They'll spend right up to that cap for sure. But so it's a lot better for the student athletes. They're not signing with an outside third party collective. They're signing contracts with Youngstown State University. All this became kind of legal as of July 1st. So our first payments are going to go out on July 31st to our student athletes. Now we'll use, everyone, like I think the Big Ten just signed a contract with PayPal. We're going to use a third party payer in Open Doors. So we'll transfer money to Open Doors, tell them who we want paid, and they'll transfer the money at the end of every month.
Is that Youngstown State or the conference?
So Youngstown State. So really the conference isn't paying anything. Now I've heard rumors and enough that I feel comfortable saying this. I think what the Big Ten's doing is, the Big Ten conference offices receive the money checks or the checks from TV rights. So all these TV contracts, the money flows through the conference, and historically would move from the conference to the institutions. So I think what's happening, like at the Big Ten level, and I'm not certain of this, but I'm fairly certain of it. But I think that money's coming to the conference office, and the Big Ten schools are telling the conference office, these are the individuals we want paid. These are the student athletes we want paid. So now I think those checks are coming from the conference office. Obviously, for the Missouri Valley Football Conference or the Horizon League, although there's some TV revenue, not enough to make these payments. So all these payments in the Missouri Valley and the Horizon League are coming from the institutions. Now, some schools have chosen to still use a third party, but we decided to bring it in house. We just think it's better for our student athletes. It's better for our coaches. They're able now to negotiate these contracts with the recruits or the transfers. So you're going to hear the words revenue share out there. That hey, this house settlement's a great thing because now the schools can share the revenue with the student athletes. Well, the reality is that's happening at Ohio State. It's not happening at Youngstown State. It's not happening at North Dakota State. We're still using outside third party fundraised dollars to sign contracts, NIL contracts with the student athletes.
Now, before we get into questions, I just so the audience kind of knows the media. You touched on it, Ron, and you said before we even went live, you may not have all the answers yet, so I don't mean to put you on the spot. But the mainstream media covers the Power Two conferences more than anybody, and they basically say, "Hey, you have a cap of like 20.5 million per year to spend, and by the way, you have to back pay 10 years backwards, which I think is the 2016 season, and you got 10 years to do it." That's the Big Ten, the SEC, I'm assuming. Uh, is there a cap for Missouri Valley and Horizon League that's not 20.5 million? I guess of what we know from the Power Two, is there anything out there for our conferences?
No, but I think you bring up a good point. Part of the house settlement is obviously that group of student athletes who sued are now going to get paid. At least some of them are. And so, the NCAA, when they settled this, they came up with a way that they're going to fund it. And I'm trying to remember, I think it was like $3 billion they settled for. And that's gonna cost us, and us meaning Youngstown State. And the first estimates were right around $400,000 a year. So not a lot of people know this, but we receive revenue distributions from the NCAA, and it's about $1.5 million a year. And a lot of that revenue comes strictly from the basketball tournament, the Final Four, March Madness. And those dollars come through like 4 or 5 different calculations or distributions, but they total about 1.5. For the next 10 years, that number is going to be closer to 1.1 million. And so this is costing this settlement costs Youngstown State money. But the problem is, and the frustrating part of it is, our kids aren't going to see those dollars. Those dollars are mostly going to go to those Ohio State football players or basketball players, or, I keep using Ohio State, but, the Kurt Hesses of the world aren't probably going to receive a check out of this thing. So, but that's real money. And I mentioned earlier that the house, individual was a men's swimmer. And what you're finding is a lot of schools, because of losing that kind of revenue and some of the other things going on in college athletics, are dropping those non-revenue sports. Cleveland State dropped wrestling, women's softball, they dropped women's golf. Fort Wayne, who's in the Horizon League, dropped softball. They dropped baseball. A lot of schools have really, they've gone non-scholarship in some of the sports. So there's been a lot between the roster limits and getting, kids getting cut and the sports being dropped. There's a lot of kids being negatively affected, really to help a small handful of kids, to be honest with you.
Sure.
So
right. It's the Olympic sports that are getting killed, really.
No question.
Yeah.
And and people's ability and maybe plans to add sports and add opportunities have gone away. I think we're fortunate here. We're at a special place. We've been at I've been fortunate to work with really great presidents and board of trustee members that that understand intercollegiate athletics and what it brings not only to a college campus, but to the recruitment efforts for students, and what type of experience these kids are having. And fortunately, we haven't been in a situation where we've had to drop sports. Really during COVID, when schools were taking that time to drop sports, we were adding sports. We had men's swimming back then. We added lacrosse. So I'm just grateful to be at a place that like this, that appreciates what an athletics department can bring to a college campus.
And it helps that Jim Tressel was president during COVID too, but
no,
he understands athletics.
Yeah, no, it was great. But in all honesty, we've been very fortunate, even with the presidents before him and now with President Johnson, that there's appreciation there, and as long as we run it the right way, I think there'll continue to be support there.
Gertie?
Yeah, Ron, I'll come out and say I won't be frustrated then that the back pay is not going to 2013. I'm going to get paid since it only goes to 2016. Anytime I see the article, it says 2016, and Searle and I text each other like, are you serious? We're 3 years away from getting a ton of money. We would have gotten like $47 or something.
Yeah. So, and it was, I mean, this whole thing's been really frustrating. I remember sitting at a basketball game, and one of our women's swimmers came up to me and said, "Hey, I just got this email, and here it was the lawyers that settled the lawsuit on the House side, and they had sent an email to all of our student athletes, basically saying, like this big rah email, like, hey, you're now able to receive funds." And so then we had to break it to them that, yeah, you're probably not going to get it back. So, so it's been really challenging to manage because answers from the NCAA have come very slowly, and I understand that because they were still trying to settle this lawsuit, but kids were trying to plan their futures, coaches were trying to plan their recruiting. It's been really challenging, and it's going to be challenging going into the future. I mean, there's a lot of kids that have been on our rosters and stuff that have added a lot to our program that in the future we might not be able to have and you guys all remember walk-ons and stuff like that, and some of them become your best friends, and those kids had great experiences here and committed a lot, and unfortunately we're not going to be able to provide those opportunities in the future.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a good point, and going back to your last interview, you kind of, we always ask the question, and one of the questions that I got from Instagram tonight was, when are we making the jump to the MAC, right? Like, it's always just on everybody's mind. And last time you kind of answered and said, which I think is a great answer, and I kind of live with this, which is, hey, you're always exploring opportunities every year. You just reflect and see what's going on, and you like to find universities and athletic programs that are similar. And so my question kind of stems from what you said earlier, which, if all of this change is happening and the Missouri Valley is making decisions, who are you on the phone with, like, from other universities? Do you have good relationships with other ADs, whether it's in the football conference or whether it's in the Horizon League, that you guys get on the horn quickly and say, hey, how are you attacking this? How are you strategizing recruiting? Or, who are some of your go-tos that are on your speed dial that I need to just call this person and have a conversation to see if we can run through this together?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I obviously have connections with a lot of the MAC schools, but the group of athletic directors that are involved in the Missouri Valley are as good as they get, in my opinion. And so their world's a lot more like ours than sometimes the Mid-American Conference, and so I've leaned probably a little bit more on them. And I'll tell you what, we've got a really good staff here. So our compliance staff, and we've got a young man named Tyler Burke that really has become our NIL expert, and has kept us ahead of our counterparts, to be honest with you. So I'm going to be honest with you. more schools are calling us, asking us what we're doing, than we're having to call other
Cool.
people. And unfortunately or fortunately, I mean, people have tried to hire Tyler away from us. Jared Calhoun, who's out at Utah State, him or his staff probably every couple weeks is calling Tyler Burke and asking questions. So we're fortunate with the staff we've got here. Ross Miltner's our general counsel who helps us on the athletic side. Rebecca Fink, and we just have an outstanding staff. And fortunately, we've been able to be one step ahead, I think, of where everybody else has been in this, whether it's raising money for NIL or just how we've approached it internally in our operations.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great point. And it's good to hear that people are kind of calling us, vice versa. Not that it would be bad to reach out, but it seems like we have a steady playbook that we're using. My next question is kind of another thing that I just wanted to follow up with. It sounds like the university is making those payments now. And so what seemed like a partnership kind of with the collective the past few years, are you guys just separate entities now? Do you still have some things that you're doing together or some things stopping? What's that partnership kind of look like?
Yeah, so the collective has been an unbelievable partner for us. We engaged them early on, and they've really been there just to help our student athletes. And so many collectives, like I mentioned earlier, it became a wild west. So they put the universities in a lot of jeopardy as far as breaking NCAA rules. Tim Petrie at the collective did just a great job. So they worked closely with Tyler Burke and our compliance staff. We knew what they were doing wasn't breaking NCAA rules. A lot of collectives were out there taking 10, 15, 20% commission off the payments off the top before they paid student athletes. Our collective didn't take a dime.
Wow.
So all the dollars that were donated to the collective just transferred straight to them. Now, bringing this internally, quite honestly, that really has pretty much eliminated our need for a collective. And he's probably happy in some sense. He was there helping us, but he took a lot of financial risk and maybe some legal risk because all those contracts were with his organization that that he was the sole shareholder of. And then we had went out and raised some money for the collective, but a lot of those payments didn't come in all at once. So a lot of times he found himself fronting money that was going to be coming, and so he took a lot of risk there. And we're very appreciative of the work that he did for us. But now it's all internal here, and he's able to kind of push that all that responsibility and risk off onto the university. And fortunately, going back to some of the things I talked about, our CFO Neil McNally and our president, sometimes when you start talking about paying student athletes or dealing with some of the dollars that we're dealing with, even your university could be a little hesitant about getting into this world. And our university, our CFO and our president and our board of trustees welcomed this idea with open arms.
That's huge. It's awesome. Go ahead, sir.
I'm gonna feed off of Kurt's first question about the MAC and things like that, and you said that essentially we used to be able to give 63 scholarships across 85 kids. Ohio State had 85 for 85. Now it's 105 across the board, whether you're at Ohio State, and if YSU so choose to do so, could give 105. So my question is, really, what is the big distinction between the FBS and the FCS level at this point, other than the playoff system versus the bowl games? And how does the FCS, how does the NCAA justify that big change. But then if a university wants to join the Sun Belt or the MAC, there's a $5 million fee to pay. But essentially, the scholarships are the same now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that was always something that was, separated the two subdivisions. Now that kind of goes away. You still need, to be invited into one of those conferences and all that stuff. And, and you're right. It all comes down to what do you want your postseason to look like? Do you want to win your conference and go to Detroit, Michigan and spend 2 days, right before Christmas? Or do you want to play for a national championship and play, 4 or 5 games on ESPN and go win a national championship? Those type of experiences are what you're looking for. And you're still allowed more coaches at that level. There's still some other rules other than the scholarships that still exist. But I've always struggled. In order for us to go play at that level, just on the football side, it's probably an extra $4 million a year. That's probably what those schools are spending. They're not generating, other than they do get more guarantee money when they play. Ohio State, Ohio State's paying them more than they're paying us, but it still doesn't make up for that number. And quite honestly, too, I wouldn't get very excited about driving over to Detroit and playing a bowl game. And nothing against Detroit; it's a great city. I love the playoff system, and maybe I've had too much experience with it. But I really like where we're at. I don't like having to play 3 or 4 Ohio States and watching your team get their head bashed in and hoping that you win 5 or 6 games in a year. And not only that, I mean, I still remember, our son played basketball at Youngstown State, and I remember driving over to Akron for our season opener. It was a Saturday night, and I was sitting up in the stands in the corner trying to hide a little bit, and there was a football student athlete selling 50-50. And I was kind of curious. I'm like, well, don't you guys, who'd you play today? And I asked the question. And he's like, oh, we play on Tuesdays. So it was so weird. I just had come from a game at Youngstown State, drove to Akron on Saturday night to watch our basketball team. It was just so weird to hear that, oh, we played Tuesday night. And I don't know if you guys get to watch those games, but
Sal loves them.
You can legitimately count on one hand how many people. I just don't think those are great experiences for our fans. It's an awful experience for our student athletes. I don't have a desire, and maybe I should, to go spend $4 million and have those type of experiences. And not only that, you're not only spending that on the football side, but multiply it by the 21 sports we have. You're probably going to spend another $12 million that, quite frankly, our institution doesn't have. And our community does a great job supporting our athletics department, but they don't have $12 million a year to spend to give our kids those type of experiences.
Yeah. And I completely agree with you versus like the bowl game and versus playing in a playoff system and for a national championship. Kurt and I argue about this all the time. And Kurt keeps bringing me facts about, there is the Tuesday, Wednesday night games and the money that those TV games do bring in for the MAC. And Paul, I'm sure Paul Lydon has said this a million times to you. He wants to play in the MAC. He yells at me every time we're together about it because he's like,
he better have 12 million.
Well, he makes the point of the schools in the MAC are regionally better for travel. And, I always did think about that. Would that be better? Would some of that cost offset like the travel that the Penguins do? And I'm not arguing for joining the MAC. I want to stay in the Missouri Valley, but there are things that I'm sure you've looked at to offset some of that stuff. And I would say the Tampa Bay Rays do it. and the Indians do it on a smaller budget, or the Guardians, sorry. But, I think we could go out and beat Akron, Kent on
Right.
smaller budgets with the kids that we have. And just Metzinger sent me a tweet that Northern Illinois already left the MAC. Ohio is planning to leave for the Sun Belt. So there might be some invites going out from the MAC. And if you get the call, how do you approach that call there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you evaluate everything. I'm sure. I'm not sitting here saying, I think you evaluate everything, and I if those dominoes start falling, I think you've got to see where you think the rest of them are going to fall, and figure out what's the best thing for your institution and your student athletes. And as we sit right now, it would have to be really interesting to see how those dominoes fall. I know a lot of those universities are really struggling with the amount of money that they're spending on intercollegiate athletics. It was a lot different when those schools had 28,000 students on their campus. And I don't know this, but you guys could probably look it up. But I would say 10, 15 years ago, Akron University might have had 28,000 students. I think they're around 14, 15,000 students now. And they're spending way more on athletics, now than they were then. And so I'm sure some of them are trying to figure out, how to reduce costs. And I know that some of them were dropping sports, especially during the COVID time, to try to save some money. So I think you're always evaluating where we're at. Again, you want to provide really good experiences for your student athletes. You don't want to be overburden university because that doesn't help any of us. Because a lot of those dollars would come from the university. And really enrollments, through this Rust Belt, through the Midwest are going down. Everyone's moving down and becoming Sal's neighbor in Florida and stuff like that. So those are challenges for our campuses. So we got to figure that out. And I'm guessing Northern Illinois looked at the Mountain West football is an opportunity, to maybe get some of that TV money. And really now the rest of their sports are coming into the Horizon League with us in a couple of years.
Okay. We constantly, this is my last add-on question. It's just flowing. We constantly have like these stories of these programs jumping up, and then there's only like maybe one or two stories of schools like going down divisions. I think St. Francis went from FCS to Division III.
Yeah.
So do you see these like potentially these schools struggling with money, like whether it's Akron or Kent? And I'm not saying that they are, just in theory, regionally, do you think that like schools like that are prime candidates to join the FCS and operate on a smaller budget? Or do you think that university will be like, we're already FBS, we're just going to stay this way and struggle through the system?
What's interesting about athletics is the power it has with the board of trustees and the presidents. And I say that if you really did some studying, the schools that have been at the FBS level and have gone down, typically what happens is then the boosters in the community, the alumni get really mad. They put a lot of pressure on the board. Next thing you know, the president's getting fired, or the board's getting turned over, and they're going right back to it. And I think that a lot of presidents, and this is just my personal opinion, a lot of presidents at some of our sister institutions would love to play football at the FCS level. When they see the numbers that we're generating revenue-wise, attendance-wise, and what our expenses are, I think they would probably feel like this is the right fit. Politically, for them on their campus, for them to walk to a microphone and saying we're taking a step back in athletics is not going to be popular. And so I'm guessing most of them, either can't convince their board to do something like that, or don't feel like that's probably in the best interest of their career.
Well said.
Is there some security, and I'm sure you're just so sick of answering these questions about jumping, but like, would there be security as a Youngstown State president or board of trustees or AD coming out and saying like, hey, we're going to do a 5-year MAC contract. We're going to play these teams. We're going to play 2 Big Ten games so that we make, I don't know, what do they pay Akron? 1.2 million or something. So you're getting 2.5 million. And if it doesn't work out, like, we'll come back FCS because we've lived in FCS for so long. Like, I don't even think that's possible, but maybe that it gives us more of an opportunity, because my big thing is like to build the brand, to build the exposure. I want the nationally televised Wednesday night games where 400,000 people are watching. Because like, I'll go back and look at our ESPN ratings for our games, and I'm like, well, why can't we have 400,000 people watch? But then, we see graphics on social media and we're not included in the graphic. And I'm like, that pisses me off as a competitor. But to hear you say, all right, I can't take a $12 million bath just so I can not be on some social media graphic. But is there security in thinking like, well, we're already there, maybe we could just bounce back and everybody would be okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing some of that go on a little bit. I think it's something out there to consider, and it might, depending on what those opportunities are, right? And what's interesting is, people have eyes on those games, not because they're interested in an OU versus Kent State. It's they're betting on the games. That's why there's eyes on the games. And
that's right.
Yeah, and so it's the only reason there's eyes on those games.
Right.
Is because on Tuesday night or a Wednesday night, there's one football game on, and there's one football game to bet. And so yeah, there's a lot of eyes on those games.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're for the right reason, but there's eyes on those games. And you're right. So the tough part of this business is trying to figure out the value of TV and what does that look like, and but I've never been one to bounce back and forth and do some different things like that. I just don't know, because you also have 20 other sports you got to worry about. So it's one thing to bounce in one sport, but it's a whole different thing to figure out, all right. And really, Northern Illinois found that that issue, and fortunately for them, they found a home in the Horizon League. But you don't always have a home for the rest of your sports. And when they left football only from the MAC said, well, then you're gone altogether. And so they had to go find a home. Now we're a little bit different because we play in a football conference. It's just a football conference.
Yeah. Nice.
So we would be okay there, but just the average school has to figure out all that other stuff too. And again, you can play a couple guarantee games. It's still not going to make up the dollars that you really need to compete. At that level, even if you're one of the lower funded ones.
Right. Well, I also, a quick, you don't have to even answer this if you don't want to. Like, what goes into that decision making? If it's a lot, it's fine. But to play 2 big money games, like we see some FCS teams play big money games, and they know they're getting that dollar value. Like, I also, somebody here on the podcast, Cyril, broke his ankle on one of those big money games. So like,
why you gotta bring that up?
Not trying to get hurt, but we also need 7 or 8 Division I wins to get in the playoffs. So
right. Yeah, and and sometimes we've struggled, quite honestly, getting one of those games scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
We feel very fortunate sometimes to get one of those scheduled. If we had opportunities to play more, would we? That's a good question. I think if we had an ability to reinvest some of those dollars, maybe in the NIL or a new locker room or stuff like that, I think we might consider that. Because our fans like it, our kids like it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be opposed to that, but there's not that many opportunities out there for us, especially because there's so many new schools at the FCS level that are now getting into those games. The Robert Morrises, the Duquesnes, you know, the St. Francis's were in those, you know, competing for those games. And quite frankly, too, you know, some of those schools would rather play some of those other schools than play Youngstown State, you know, because we've had some success in some of those games. So, you know, so really that opportunity hasn't been there for us to even really try to consider whether we want to do it or not.
Right.
But I would have that conversation with Doug, but I think when you do something like that, you need to try to reinvest those dollars.
Yeah.
Well, a couple things on those notes. One, I did want to congratulate you. You did lock up money games through 2029. We did see the Ohio State game now scheduled. That puts us a money game all the way through up till 2030. So congratulations on that. That's awesome. And on Cyril, I'm glad you mentioned that last note. I was all for going to the MAC before the House settlement, but since the House settlement, I'm thinking the MAC's going to come to us. And Ron kind of alluded to it. You don't want to be that athletic director, that president that goes backwards. And I don't expect you to comment on this, Ron, but if you did see, Missouri State made the jump from our conference to the CUSA. I don't know what happened to the athletic director. I don't know if he jumped ship when he saw the numbers or they fired him when they realized the numbers they had to spend, but he's gone. So that's another conversation. And I try to be quick because I have a million questions on this House settlement, but I'll zoom in on it. One of the questions I have is I saw that North Dakota State and maybe South Dakota State, they were opting out. And I saw the Bison like at midnight the night before opted back in. Why would you opt out? And did anyone opt out? And then what is the pro? I think you answered this already, but what is the pro of opting out? Why would they do that when they know the Illinois State and the Youngstown states are in?
Yeah, I mean the advantage of opting out was it was all about the roster limits. So if you opted out, you didn't have to worry about the roster limits. And obviously that was the pain point of opting in was we were committing to going to 105 football players. But there's a lot of legal protections by opting into the settlement. And we felt also by being able to bring NIL internally was going to be really important for us competitively, you know, because we felt like schools were, you know, that was going to be an advantage recruiting wise, that student athletes, recruits, kids in the portal was going to feel a lot better about signing a contract with a university than an outside collective. But that's why they were opting out there for a while. This designated, you know, I talked a little bit about these designated student athletes where you could, you know, still retain kids that you were going to cut. That made it a lot easier for North Dakota State. Oh, my lights went out. I'm not moving around enough.
Saving dollars. I like it.
Yeah. You know, so
does everybody opt in our conference?
What's that?
Did everybody opt in on our conference?
I don't know that for sure. I thought I had heard that I don't know if it was South Dakota. I thought there was still someone that still opted out, but we were opting in the whole time. We were bringing, right. You know, we were bringing the NIL internal the whole time. We just thought that was better for our student athletes and better for our coaches.
Now, talking about the scholarship size, I believe Title IX is still in effect. So if anyone wanted to go crazy and do 90 scholarships,
right,
does that mean they need to come up with 2 new women's sports teams in addition to that?
Yeah. So like if we do go to 105, it's not that simple. We would need to match that on the women's side. That's another reason. Now, you know, what'll be interesting to play out, which, you know, as you guys seem to do a good job keeping up with the news media on this, is pretty soon you're going to start seeing Title IX lawsuits. You're going to see female student athletes suing because Ohio State, if their budget's $20 million, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing they're spending 18 or 19 on men's sports. The Biden administration, in their last week, they're Department of Ed came out with a ruling that NIL payments were subject to Title IX. Okay. Well, that would have blown up this whole settlement, to be quite honest with you. But I was happy when that came out because going into that week, we didn't know, everyone was trying to make a determination. Is NIL payments going to be subject to Title IX? We didn't have that answer. And my biggest fear was we weren't going to have that answer. And then we would have to take that legal risk. Now, by the Biden administration making that decision, it became obvious to us that as soon as the Trump administration got in place, that they would reverse it, and that's what happened. So right now, the Department of Ed has I don't know if it's a ruling or whatever, but it's not a law. But they basically made the determination that NIL payments are not subject to Title IX. So right now you're seeing a huge imbalance of payments to men's student athletes over women. Now, that doesn't mean that a female student athlete can, they can very well file a lawsuit, and we're going to have some of those cases, and it's going to be decided in a court, not by the Department of Ed, I don't believe, unless Congress steps in and makes a law that defines it a little bit better. But you're going to see Title IX lawsuits this summer. I'd be shocked if you don't see a bunch of them. And the NCAA will be back in court.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that bothers me about NIL, and you say there's cap on it now, and that's like awesome. And NIL stands for name and likeness, and it's if somebody wants to sign autographs, like Johnny Manziel was, getting paid under the table to sign autographs. He was getting paid because somebody wanted his signature or whatever. And, I feel like now it's just NIL is just a way to say, here's a paycheck to play for us. But really, you're not bringing, like, your name, your likeness is not bringing any money into the university, because it's like, oh, well, Ohio State can sell number 2 jerseys for Terrell Pryor, and Terrell Pryor doesn't get any of that money. Now his name's not on it, but everyone knows that number 2 jersey was Terrell Pryor's. And I could see where it's like, okay, the NIL deal should be structured into like something like that. And I'm not saying, and it kind of just saying like, I don't want to say anything to get me in trouble here.
What are you saying, Kyle?
Typically football, basketball are your big money sports.
Revenue sports.
So it's hard to say like, well, if football gets at Ohio State $18 million in football, then you have to spend $18 million across other sports, whether it's all female athletics or whatever the case may be. And I think that's kind of where this NIL is getting really muddy. Is it doesn't have anything to do with your name or your likeness anymore. It's just like a professional, semi-professional contract.
Sure.
Yeah. We're in pay for play world, aren't we? I mean, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, there's two kind of NIL. There's the true NILs. We do have some student athletes that have called corporations and stuff like that and are doing commercials or have sold, they have so many followers, that they've been able to monetize that or run summer camps and things like that. The true name, image, and likeness.
Yeah.
And then you have the pay for play. I mean, now technically these kids still have to do something for it, whether it's sign autographs or volunteer at at the United Way or the Rich Center for Autism on campus. But the reality is, you're paying student athletes, and I'm sure the NCAA or general counsel wouldn't like me saying that, but I mean, that's the reality that we're sitting in right now. So it does become a little bit uncomfortable in that sense. But that's where we're at right now.
And unfortunately, college athletics, in my opinion, is headed to a dark place. And in my opinion, is are we headed in that direction that student athletes are going to be considered employees at the, let's say, in the Big Ten? Do you see that happening where they're signing contracts?
Well, I don't, and I think now, I think whether you're wherever you are in in politics, wherever you are in almost anything, I think the pendulum, the older you get, you realize there's this pendulum, and sometimes when it swings too far, and really for the NCAA, it swung too far. We had too many ridiculous rules that that didn't allow student athletes to take advantage of some benefits. If Ohio State was selling a certain jersey and they were profiting from it, the fact that the student athlete wasn't able to receive any of that money was ridiculous. So that pendulum, because our rules were so restrictive, we started getting sued, and rightfully we started losing. Well, now that pendulum, in my opinion, has swung all the way back the other way. And I honestly think it's about as bad as it's going to get. And I think this House settlement starts to put, it, you know, their arms around it. We'll never put the cat back in the bag or whatever that saying is. But that pendulum will slowly start swinging back. And just like I had mentioned earlier, Deloitte and Touche is now looking at some of these contracts and saying, wait a minute, they're basically calling bullshit. This contract, you should not be paying someone X number of dollars to do what they're doing. And so a lot of those contracts are getting kicked back. So there's this revenue share model that, Ohio State and some of those schools are using, but there's even a cap on that. So some of those dollars should start coming down. And then go back to, your employment question. Now I think that Congress is starting to say, hey, this is, these rules and what's going on in college athletics isn't good for our campuses. It's not good for the student athletes, and college athletics is really important to our country. I think you'll start seeing Congress now. Nick Saban talked about possibly being part of a commission, that President Trump was going to create. I think you're going to find that, within the next 12 months that Congress is going to say student athletes cannot be employees. I think that's going to be a directive here pretty soon.
Just two comments, because I know we got to sum things up. We're coming to a close here. One comment I just have on the House settlement is you'd mentioned there's 105 scholarships going to the Ohio States and the Big Ten that they're going to be going to. I think the transfer portal's calmed down, but I think with this, it's really going to hype up, because now Ohio State's taking more talent out of the high school to 100, and it's going to trickle all the way down to Coach Phillips, who can't get that talent because they're going up. And then when those guys realize they're not playing at all and have no chance of playing at Ohio State, they're going to transfer down. I think it's going to have a trickle effect. And then last comment on the MAC is I now that Ohio State's spending the $20.5 million a year with Big Ten has a $1 billion TV contract, when is Central Michigan going to quit pretending they're playing for the same trophy as a team that's spending $20 million and not losing sleep over it? So I see those group of five just collapsing eventually. And you don't have to comment on this, Ron, but I foresee the FCS and the group of five eventually. I think we sit tight and wait for them to collapse down to us, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And they'll survive as long as the Big Ten and the SEC feeds them a little bit of money, makes them feel, and that's really what has kept them at that level, is whether it's through a guarantee check or sharing of some of the TV revenue from the new playoff system that they've created. It's almost as if the Big Ten and the SEC are giving them enough food to stay alive. And, maybe at some point, here, especially on the football side, to be honest with you, that there could be a chance that that group just goes away and, and does their own thing, specifically on the football side.
Right.
And to go back to your comment real quick, I, Ohio State and those guys, whether they were on scholarship or not, still had 130 kids on their team. So there is already kind of a trickle effect. Now, the question is, can that trickle effect really help us? I'm going to be honest with you. My experience here is if we get a transfer from Ohio State and that kid wasn't already playing, getting playing time at Ohio State, more than likely they're not going to play here. I very seldom see a backup from a Power 4 school come here and be better than our starters. So I don't know if that trickle effect really helps us. To be honest with you, the transfers that have helped us the most are the kids that don't get recruited, end up at a Division II school, or a kid that goes to an Ivy League type school for the education. It's those kids that are transferring to us that help us more on the football field. They appreciate more about what we have to offer here. And those are the transfers that have helped us the most. And they come to us with a ton of experience. The other side of this is, and I think Coach Phillips is playing this right, is, now everyone there's such anxiety about recruiting kids out of the portal. And normally those kids don't work out for you. But there's now such great talent available at the high school level. And I think we've really benefited by that. And, there's no way to prove anything, but, I kind of feel like this might be the most talented freshman class in our school's history that's sitting that just arrived on our campus. And I think you guys probably seen it if you guys are social media guys. I'm not. But, this is a recruiting class that was ranked 3rd in the country. I don't know if you guys saw that or not. Sacramento State had the number 1 recruiting class, and North Dakota State had the number 2, and we were number 3. This is, and that's based upon stars that these kids, 3 stars or whatever. So we'll see how that plays out. But physically, how they look the part. I'm sure Kurt would have loved to throw him to a 6'7" tight end. Well, we have one of those now. So, so I the key though is, building the culture and being able to raise enough money in NIL to retain those kids. And we think that's kind of our frame of mind right now.
Real quick, I don't mean to be a mic hog, guys, but before we run out of time,
Sure,
definitely want to congratulate you, Ron, on I think it's the first women's national championship for Youngstown State. Congratulations on that. And just real quick, for the listeners, I just have to know the story behind how we got a bowling team real quick, if you don't mind. How'd you get the inspiration of the story on bringing bowling to Youngstown State, and how after just so many years did we just win a national championship? Because that escalated very quickly. Yeah,
so it's kind of funny. And for me, it started back, I started working here in 96, and in 96, we started women's swimming, women's soccer, and women's golf. And when we did it, we needed to start the sports for Title IX. And to be honest with you, looking back, we didn't really give them a fighting chance from day one. We didn't give them a ton of scholarships up front. They probably didn't have a full coaching staff. They were kind of forced to, hey, let's get a team on the field. And the problem is when you don't get it started the right way, in my opinion, you start losing. And when you start losing, you develop a brand. And that brand's not good when you're losing. And it's hard to change your brand. And so when we started adding some of these sports, I feel like I learned from that. And so when we started bowling, it was a sport that I knew, hey, there's only so many schools. We can go compete for a national championship. And quite honestly, we don't do anything different with our bowling team than anyone else does. but we talked about winning a national championship from day one, the very first press release. This is an opportunity for us to go win a national championship. And it allowed us to recruit good coaches, and it allowed us to recruit good student athletes. And it created a brand for us. But we also hired a coach, gave that coach like 18 months to go recruit before we even started competing. And we gave them the full scholarships. We made sure that when we started the sport, we were able to be competitive. And so that's it. I mean, we talked a good game, which gave us the ability to hire really, really good coaches. They recruited really good student athletes. You guys, if you were with us in Las Vegas with those kids, you would have been so proud of how they handled themselves. I still get goosebumps, and I know that sounds corny. I mean, it was a great group of student athletes, and but remember, that was, we've only been in existence for 9 years. That was our third Final Four, and so I'm hoping we stay there. But the same thing happened with lacrosse. We built it the same way. And the second year of existence, we won the Mid-American Conference Championship. We shared a MAC championship. And the same thing with men's swimming. We started that during COVID, and I'll mark your calendar for February and see where our men's swimming team ends up in the Horizon League Championship. So now we're still trying to get over our brand a little bit, to be honest with you, in soccer and our women's swimming team. Actually, our men's swimming team's a little bit ahead of where our women's swimming team is now. Our women's swimming team's gotten a lot better, and our soccer team program's gotten a lot better because we started playing soccer on the football field. You guys, Kurt, you know this more than anyone, how that crown of that football field is. I mean, I stood and watched for 10 years. Our poor girls were chasing soccer balls downhill as they were rolling out of bounds. But we've built a beautiful facility, and we've been able to hire really good coaches, and we're getting all those turned around. But brand is an important thing in this business, and it's hard to change your brand. I think we've now successfully changed our brand in men's basketball, but we've always had a good brand in women's basketball. So, so we started it the right way, in my opinion, is probably the quickest answer to that question.
A lot of Penguin Nation was watching that night, especially us. Everyone was up watching it in Vegas till like midnight, 1 a.m. Right, Curdy?
Yeah, it was. We went up 3-1, and you're like, all right, now we got to just close. We just got to close. And that girl on the other team, who was their closer, like their anchor,
yes, the anchor,
she caught fire, and it was like we had to get strike after strike if we had
to hit the transfer portal
because she was crushing it. It tied 3-3, and Sal and I, it's like 11:30. You on TV, Ron, you were just stone faced. You were like, "Oh, we got this." You were calm as could be. Your heart may have been beating, but you couldn't tell on TV because they kept panning. And I'm like, "Look at Strollo; he's calm as can be out there. He knows we're gonna win the title." And we won it Game 7.
It was so painful to sit there. I begged not to sit there, and they, when they do the broadcast for TV, it's completely different than the rest of the tournament and how these kids bowl. You never have people sitting right beside you as you're bowling. And they obviously set that up for TV. And I was like, I don't want to sit there. And actually the Jacksonville State AD was sitting right next to me. So we were, it was hard to cheer. But there's some pictures of me cheering, but it was just, it's a great sport. The margin of error is really, really small. The technology behind the sport would blow you away. We could have a whole podcast on women's bowling.
Sounds good.
I'm telling you,
I want the coach on.
You'd be blown away. I mean, we traveled, so we literally showed up. So the next morning, we were flying home, and we show up to the Las Vegas airport with 81 bowling balls. 81 bowling balls. Yeah. 81 bowling balls. So that just gives you a little sense of,
wow.
Does Timmy Gallo carry that?
But it's a great sport. I mean, all these sports are just so unique, in their technology and how committed these kids are. It's a lot of fun. it was a lot of fun. So
Great sport.
Last questions, Kurt and Kyle, just athletics at all before we let Ron go?
I'm looking
No,
for
man.
stuff.
We covered a lot. Mets has one, but it kind of touches on conference futures and things like that we kind of
Yeah, we hit a lot of
discussed
that.
a little bit.
Anything on athletics abroad that our listeners should know about that may be going on?
yeah, I mean, on top of the bowling national championship, 18 of our 21 sports play in the Horizon League, and so we just won our third out of the last 5 years all sports trophy. So really proud of how all of our sports have competed across the board. But yeah, that was the third time in the last 5 years, and the other 2 years we finished second. So really proud of all of our coaches and student athletes for the success. A couple things, we're getting a new video board in the football stadium. I don't know, Kyle,
Again?
if you noticed. Yeah. Well, every 10 to 12 years, we get a new video board. So there'll be, that's why when you saw me, I was outside checking the video board.
Oh, okay.
And then we're remodeling the football lobby. So we're investing in there, and we're trying to raise some money for the football locker room. So if any listeners have deep pockets, we're trying to raise some dollars to renovate that football locker room. A lot of great things happen. We've been able to invest in a lot of different programs. We just got done spending about $4 or $5 million in Beagley, and we've got a couple more phases to go in that project for our basketball and volleyball programs.
Nice. You guys good, Kyle and Kurt?
Yep.
Yeah, I just got an IG question for Searle, but if we want to let Ron go, we can let him go.
Well, one thing's for sure, it's only a few weeks away until I think we're reporting to camp, right?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And any more of these kids don't go home. So I actually got an opportunity this morning. We did our compliance kind of NCAA call or meeting with our student athletes. So I got some time. I always want our freshmen to know who I am when they walk by me in the hallway, and so I got some time to spend in front of them this morning. So those freshmen have been on our campus for probably a couple weeks now, and they'll get an opportunity. They got an opportunity around 4th of July to go home for a little bit, and then I think they get a week break right before camp. But we're essentially, nowadays you're allowed to do a little bit of practicing, and it's kind of already started for us, to be honest with you.
Well,
Albie said they were doing some OTAs, and then they report to camp July 27th.
Yeah,
First practice.
I don't know the exact date, to be honest with you, but that sounds right. That sounds right.
I feel like every year it just gets earlier and earlier.
Yeah, it does, and it's what they sign up for. But what's different is there's no 2-a-days. I mean, camp's a lot. It's a lot different than when I played, for sure. I don't know what your guys' experience was, but camp was
2 days was a waste.
We're not allowed to share our camp experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't want to get you in
Well,
trouble.
Our second practice is always easy as hell. Like our second practice,
it was a walkthrough.
We were a junior or senior. It was walkthrough.
Yeah,
not
football.
Not the second year.
Senior, he took care of us for our second practice.
Okay, we had 4 years with him.
Well, I only remember the senior year.
The easy one.
Coaches started getting a lot smarter, but when I was playing, we went at it hard for 2 practices, and you come back for a special teams practice at night.
Jeez.
Did you? Our second year, we were at Leiden with no air conditioning. You remember that season? It was Haycock's last camp.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories there. And remember, when I played, we were on quarters, so we didn't start school until late September. And so you essentially were in 2-a-days through the first 3 or 4 football games. Like we would play at least 3 games before school started. And so coaches had you all day long. They had you all now, it was wild, and then we went to semesters and started school a lot earlier.
Could not wait for camp to break and classes to start so we could get a little time away from Wolf.
Each other. Where do they live now? Is it still Leiden in the courtyards, or where they?
Yeah, I mean, most of them now are in apartments, and we've got so many more on campus apartments, and so yeah. What's different now is we would, at least I think maybe even for you guys, like we had the whole football team were in Kilcawley or Leiden. Now they live where they live. They're not all staying in the same place anymore. So if they have an apartment in Austintown, or if they have an apartment on campus, or if they're going to live in the dorm, that's where they go back to that night. So we don't keep them together there anymore. It just got
Wow.
too expensive, and the kids hated it. So
Oh God, hate it.
Oh,
That's an understatement.
I got put with Najee Tyler going into my redshirt freshman year. Najee transferred in from Purdue, and Najee could sling the rock. There was no starting quarterback, and so what's Wolf do? He puts us together, and we camp for the next 4 weeks. We're in the same bedroom, competing for a job.
right.
Nothing was more awkward and challenging than
Yeah.
come on.
These and remember that first camp, Wolf took our phones and said, "You guys are going to be teammates, hang out with each other." I feel like this generation of student athletes' heads would explode, literally explode, if you took their phone and said, "Go be social with your teammates."
And I was so stressed out I was going to lose someone's phone and be responsible for it.
But honestly, I will say this: we talk about it all the time. That first camp, like, we were so angry, and then the second camp, we were like, "Awesome! Take our phone. It's 24/7 football with our buds," and like we had no care in the world. Didn't know what day it was, but we were just playing football and hanging out.
I wish someone would take our phones.
No kidding. Yeah, when I played, the Tress would always put a senior with a freshman. So my roommate was Mark Brungard when I.
Oh, nice.
All right.
So, crazy.
All right. Any last words for Ron? Because I know we held him a little over time. I definitely appreciate your time, Ron. Anything else from Kurt or Kyle?
No, we're all good, man. We talked about everything.
Ron, this was awesome, man. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Appreciate
we're excited about all athletics coming up this fall, and even basketball in the wintertime.
Yeah, just let me know when you need me back. So you guys are doing a great job. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, man. Thank you for coming on.
All right. Thanks, guys. Go Penguins.
Go Penguins.
Go Penguins.
Did Ron get out okay?
No, I'm still here.
We were waiting for you to end the show.
Oh, you see that red phone says leave.
All right. See ya. Take care.
See you, Ron. Thank you.
So what tie do you have for Kyle?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I just got a random question. It's a Formula One question, so I didn't really want to throw it in there anywhere after we just talked about the freaking house thing.
Oh, hit me with the Formula One question.
Yeah.
Is it about Christian Horner?
It says, first off, great podcast, guys. Started tuning in January. My question's for Searle. Searle, in the previous podcast, you've mentioned that you're an F1 fan. Based upon recent results, did you expect Yuki Tsunoda's poor season so far? Would you say that he is overrated before the start of the season? Looking forward to this season. Go Gwens.
I think Yuki is a talented driver. I think that it's tough to, it's all dependent on the car and the team's budget and a couple bad breaks here and there. I think all those guys are extremely talented. Obviously, some are better than others. Are there drivers out there that are probably better than him? Sure, that deserve a seat. But, I mean, I think he's wildly entertaining to watch.
And P.S., when do you expect him to get his first podium? I don't know what that means.
A podium is first, second, or third.
I could have put that.
I don't know. It's hard to say because Hulkenberg's been driving for like 10, 11, 12 years, and he just got his first podium. So, I mean, it's a Hulkenberg.
Oh.
So, who sent that?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't tell you.
I can't believe that we threw Ron Strollo off for that Formula One question. I feel like
I thought we were
drove-
having Ron Stoops on tonight.
Well, anyway, for the
I
audience
don't
and
know.
listeners,
I don't know.
for
Go
the
for it,
audience
Sal.
and listeners, we will have more shows coming up probably every other week as we get closer to camp and to season. We'll start dissecting the 2025 season, going over the schedule, looking deeper into the conference. I just know that House settlement, it's very easy to find information about the Big Ten and the SEC and what it means to them. Definitely wanted to learn what it meant to us over at Youngstown State and the Missouri Valley Football Conference. Before I lock it up, though, any comments, questions from either yourselves or YouTube or IG, Kurt or Kyle?
Yeah, dude, way to leave me for the whole let's join the MAC freaking movement.
I don't know anymore now. I mean,
That's what I'm saying.
I was with it until I realized Ohio State has $20 million to spend. Then it's like,
dude, $12 million? Come on. That's insane.
20.
No, I know
20.
that, but like,
Well, no, he was saying our
probably
budget would have to increase to roughly $4 million, but across all sports, if you were to join, you're looking at a total investment of around $12 million for all sports, which is just not feasible for YSU. But, you know, I think he made a lot of good points. And his argument is my argument. I was like, I don't want to play in a crap bowl game just to call it a bowl game. I would much rather play for a national championship, and that's always been my stance. I do think that regionally the MAC makes way more sense for us to be in, but that's just not.
And then one more thing on because Ron couldn't say it, but I'm gonna call a spade for him. He kind of alluded to, but he can't say it. I think these athletic directors, especially in the MAC, they share their P&Ls together, and I think people in the MACs USA they see his P&L and they're jealous and they're nuts that we're either breaking even or we're at a profitable letter and they're just bleeding money up top. And like he said, if an athletic director at the MAC said, hey, we're going to drop down to FCS, someone's getting fired or the boosters are going to cut you off. And that's something that they can't do. And I think, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, I think he was alluding to that without saying it, that we're floating at a profitable number and they're not.
Yeah, I think that they would have to make, like, even if we were to get an invite or an offer, right? Say OU leaves, say somebody else leaves, 2 spots open up. Like, I don't think that we would pull out of the Horizon League to join the MAP. You know what I mean? Like, in the sports where we compete in the Horizon League. Right. So, like, the MAC would force us to do that, which is what we learned tonight, which is MAC wants you all in or all out. And so the thing about playing in the Missouri Valley Football Conference is we have access to the Horizon League as an athletic program too, which seems to be a great mid-major conference. If the MAC would come back and say, okay, we are desperate, we only want you for football, I think he revisits it.
Now, on that point, and I don't know this, is the CUSA an all or nothing? Did Missouri State take everything with them? Or did they just go on football? Because the CUSA, we didn't get time to get into it with Ron Strollo so much about conference realignment. Next time he comes on, we'll have to. But there's rumors of that shift coming now that the Pac-12 is becoming a thing again. That means the Sun Belt is the Big 12 is going to be looking for people. The Sun Belt's going to be looking for people. And they seem to be chipping away at the CUSA. CUSA seems to invite FCS teams. Does the CUSA make sense for us? Is it a lower budget? Is it football only? Maybe the CUSA.
Well, to your point, at what point?
But maybe that's
more geographically beneficial.
But to your point, at what point do FCS conferences as a whole just make a jump to an FBS? conference.
I asked Patty that. Did I tell you I emailed her that one time?
Yeah, and it's just like, and my big hang up is, sure, you still there's a couple different rules with probably the amount of coaches that you can have on a FCS team versus an FBS team, and really to me that just comes down to budget, and that's just more pay to play. Just because you have the ability to pay an additional 8 coaches doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And just because you have a cap of 20 million to spend, he said he's not going to spend it. My thing is, the distinction was dividing up the scholarships at the FCS level. Now it seems like there's nothing stopping how you give a scholarship. So, and I didn't ask this, and this is a kind of a thing. He's like, we're probably going to stick with the 60 some scholarships across 85 guys or whatever, but really you could divvy up 80 scholarships across you can. I don't know if you give a scholarship now, it has to be full at the FCS level, or if you can divvy it up. So Ohio State, I don't think at the FBS level you can divvy at all. If you give a scholarship, you give a scholarship.
Right.
But you're saying now the FCS can give up to 105 scholarships, where it used to be 60 whatever across 85. You could give more guys more money. You could give 105 guys something.
Yeah, I think he was just
if you can divvy it up still.
Let me go back at you. We're doing 63 now, and we know that not all 63 are full.
But okay, I understand that. That was the old rule. The new rule is FCS can give 105 full scholarships. So it's an institution thing. He's allowed to do that. Like he said, if he were to give 105 scholarships, they would have to go add women's sports. But like, say you wanted to up your scholarship to 75 from 65 across 85, say, okay, we have 75 full scholarship allotments available. We can give that to 90 guys or 100 guys versus the old 83. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I get what you mean. I get what you mean. You could divvy it up more, give more partial scholarships.
Correct.
If you want
to everybody across the board.
Right.
I think I don't know if he said this prior to it or if he said this when he was on air with us. He's like, the scholarships are the scholarships, right? Like 63 is where we're going to be around. We may give more or less. Ohio State's going to give 85, 90, like whatever, more or less. For recruiting purposes and get players, the NIL and the pay is really what matters. Like, that's how you separate yourself and get players. Yeah. And so maybe the scholarships aren't as big of a deal as they were when we were playing. It's what am I getting on the side? What's my paycheck look like? What are my opportunities look like? And, that's the stuff that really brings in recruits.
And I don't know if I should be sharing this, but I think it's okay to share. He did tell me one time, I think it was at your Hall of Fame, Kurt, was what NIL did for us was huge on the Horizon League side in men's basketball. Mostly because if you look at a Horizon League, it's Green Bay, it's the Detroits, it's the Milwaukees, it's schools in larger cities where they are second fiddle to professional teams.
Right.
When in the city of Youngstown, we are the show, and it's bringing more money. The NIL is out there more so for us over the other Horizon League sports. Now, again, I don't want to put words in his mouth. He didn't say Horizon League, he didn't say men's basketball, but when he mentioned other schools, I alluded to what he was getting at, which is the Horizon League and basketball. So full disclosure, he did not say that directly to me.
Right.
But yeah.
He's never coming on again or talking to you anymore, so.
I love this side of it. Now that I'm like in business, I love the side of the athletic director and the conference commissioner. But on the just real quick, compare that to the Missouri football conference side. Fargo, they are the show in town. Sioux Falls, they are the show in town. We don't have that as much advantage on the football side, if that makes sense.
Yeah. We know that. We got more competition.
Yeah.
Around
no
it.
And he didn't really comment. I mean, he smirked a little bit, but he didn't really comment. I really want to know the story behind the Missouri State athletic director who's no longer with them after jumping. And one thing is, it will be very fun to watch Missouri State this year as they compete against USC West, Marshall, SMU, and then they get in the conference play. Just seeing where they land in that conference, because I think head-to-head our conference is better than that conference, but that's in theory. Missouri State will kind of be the test rabbit for that. But anyone have anything else to recap on the Strollo interview?
No, I'm driving.
Lock it up.
You good?
Lock it up.
Lock it up. All right, boys. so shut it down. Sorry, guys. Glad I didn't put anything on the script other than that. But again, you have been listening to the Youngstown Football Penguin Podcast. We are on Instagram, Whitetown Penguin Podcast. Please follow it. That is where you'll see when our next shows will be, as we kind of start to gear back into college football season that we're all excited about. But once again, that is Kyle Sturr. That is Kurt Hess. I'm Sal Guardo. And as always, go Penguins.